A stormy night in the Wyoming wilderness, a broken woman fleeing her past, and a war-scarred cowboy who can't even steady his hands to sew a shirt. What happens when two wounded souls meet at the edge of nowhere and realize they might be each other's only way home? Sometimes, the life you never planned becomes the one that heals you. This channel tells stories of the Wild West, cowboys, love on the frontier. If this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, comment where you're watching from, share, and subscribe for more. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Thank you for being part of our community.
The stagecoach left her in the pouring rain, clutching a single bag with the last pieces of her old life. Her fancy teaching certificate felt useless out here. Her father had called it a change of scenery, which was a polite way of saying she needed to hide her shame somewhere far from home. She pushed open the heavy station door and stepped into a single large room that smelled of wood smoke and damp clothes. A fat stove in the corner radiated a welcome warmth against the biting wind. An old woman sat knitting by the heat, the click of her needles a steady beat against the drumming rain. She never looked up. In the far corner, a man sat with his hat pulled low, a clear sign he was not looking for company. His clothes were soaked nearly black, and his boots were caked with thick mud. A rifle leaned against the wall next to him, sitting there with a casual deadliness. He was exactly the kind of rough Western man she had been warned about, and looking at him, she had to agree. Evelyn found a spot on a bench, a safe distance from the others. Her traveling dress was heavy with mud and likely ruined, but she found it hard to care. The station master, a big man with wary eyes, told them the stage was stuck for the night. He sold her a bowl of stew for 2 bits. It was mostly hot broth with a few sad-looking vegetables, but it was warm. While she ate, a crack of lightning lit the room. It caught the man in the corner just right. He was younger than she had thought, maybe 30, with a strong jaw and a busted nose. For a split second, the light hit his eyes, and they were the most startling blue she had ever seen. Then she realized what he was doing. This tough-as-nails man was trying to sew, and he was failing badly. His large, calloused hands fumbled with the tiny needle and thread. She could see a faint tremor in his fingers, making his stitches huge and crooked, pulling the fabric and making the tear worse. He cursed under his breath, then jabbed the needle too hard, pricking his thumb. A bright bead of blood welled up. He just wiped it on his trousers and went right back to his clumsy work. Watching him, something in Evelyn gave way. The prim and proper rules of her old life seemed foolish now. What good was a reputation when you had already lost it? Before she could second-guess herself, she stood up. The floorboards creaked. The knitting needles paused. The man finally looked up from his frustrating task, and she saw the exhaustion warring with pride in his bright blue eyes. "You are making a real dog's breakfast of that," she said. Her voice was gentle, the kind she used on a child struggling with his letters. The man just stared. In the lamplight, his eyes were a startling blue, sharp with a keen mind that his rough appearance tried to hide. For a long second he said nothing, and Evelyn felt a knot of worry. Maybe men out here did not take kindly to a woman speaking so directly. "It is my only good shirt," he finally rumbled, his voice like gravel. The accent was from out here, but not quite Texan. "Caught it on a fence post this morning." He said it like a confession, as if the shirt was more than just cloth. Evelyn understood. Sometimes one good thing is all that keeps you from falling apart completely. "Then you ought to let someone who knows what they are doing fix it," she said, surprised by her own nerve. "Before you turn it into a polishing rag." A flicker of what might have been a smile crossed his face. "Are you offering, ma'am?" "Evelyn Moore." She held out her hand. He set the needle down, wiped his dusty palm on his trousers, and took her hand. His grip was careful, his calloused hand warm. "Caleb Rhodes," he said. "And I would be mighty grateful, Miss Moore. This needle and I are not seeing eye to eye." He had somehow managed to stitch the shirt front to itself, creating a useless, lumpy fold. "Good heavens," Evelyn murmured under her breath. You truly were making a mess of it. Told you, Caleb said, and this time she could clearly hear the amusement. Never had a knack for it. Always had. He stopped cold, a shadow passing through his eyes. Always had someone else to see to it. That little pause said more than words ever could. Evelyn did not ask. She just started carefully pulling out his clumsy stitches. "Where did you learn to sew like that?" Caleb asked after a moment. "Boston," Evelyn said, threading the needle like it was second nature. "Every young lady there learns to sew." He snorted softly. "Sounds awful." "It was," she admitted, surprised at her own honesty as she began making small, perfect stitches. "But I suppose it has its uses, even out here." "Here?" Caleb asked. "Pine Hollow. I am to be the new school teacher. I start next week." "Pine Hollow," Caleb repeated slowly. "That is my territory." Evelyn's hands stopped for just a heartbeat. "You live there?" "Near enough. I have a ranch about 5 miles out, Silver Ridge. Calling it a ranch is a bit of a stretch, though. It is mostly hope and a few head of cattle." Evelyn could not help but smile. "That sounds like most places out here, from what I hear. What brings a lady from Boston to a place like Pine Hollow, if you do not mind me asking?" Evelyn did mind, but she knew it was a fair question. People did not come to this wild country by accident. It was always because of trouble or desperation. "Opportunity," she said, keeping her eyes on her work. "The position was available, and I needed a fresh start. A place where no one knew her story." "Opportunity," Caleb said. "That is a polite word for it." She looked up, but he was not judging her. He was understanding her. "And you?" she asked. "What brought you to Silver Ridge?" "Same thing," he said simply. "A chance to build something of my own." "Were you a soldier?" The question tumbled out before she could stop it. The way he stood, the way he watched the room. A muscle in his jaw jumped. "The war," he said, his voice flat. "Yes, ma'am." He offered nothing more. He just watched her hands as the needle flashed in the lamplight. The little station house suddenly felt much smaller. "I am sorry," Evelyn said softly. "I know it was terrible." "It was," Caleb agreed. "But it is done now. Time for building instead of breaking, right?" He said it like he was trying to convince himself more than her. She bit the thread clean, a childhood habit her mother never could break. "There. Good as it is going to get. A sight better than when you were wrestling with it." Caleb took the shirt and looked at her handiwork. His own hands, she noticed, were steady now. "That is fine work, Miss Moore," he said, his voice full of real thanks. "Truly fine." "You are welcome, Mr. Rhodes." "Caleb," he said, "we do not go in for much of that formal business out here." "Evelyn, then," she replied, and the air between them seemed to change, to soften. He pulled the mended shirt on. It settled on his shoulders correctly now, no longer bunched up from his bad stitches. He looked at her, a question in his blue eyes. "Can I ask you something, Evelyn?" She nodded. "Why did you bother? Most folks would have just let me make a fool of myself." She could have given a polite answer, but something about this man, in this stormy place at the edge of the world, demanded the truth. "Because I know what it feels like," she said at last, "to be all alone and struggling with something that ought to be simple. And I know how much it means when somebody steps in to help, without you even having to ask." He understood. He opened his mouth to say something, but a loud clap of thunder swallowed the words. Glass. "Ain't seen a gully washer like this in a while." "Does it get this bad often?" Evelyn asked, moving to the window. "The weather, I mean." "Sometimes worse," he said with a half-smile. "Welcome to Wyoming, Miss Moore. The land is pretty, but the sky will try to kill you for looking at it sideways." She let out a real laugh, the first one in ages. "You make it sound so inviting. Just telling it straight. No use starting a new job with your head in the clouds." "I appreciate that," Evelyn said, and she truly did. Boston was full of pretty lies. Honest talk, even when it was harsh, was a comfort. They stood watching the storm tear across the prairie. Lightning lit up miles of grass bent flat by the wind. The road was a river of mud. The mountains were just dark shapes against a black sky. "You scared?" Caleb asked softly. "Of the storm, the new country, the teaching job. Of starting over." Evelyn drew a breath. "Terrified," she admitted. "Absolutely terrified. Absolutely." "Good," he said, which surprised her. "That means you've got sense. The ones who ain't scared don't last. They show up thinking it's some grand adventure. Then winter comes or the well runs dry and they run right back home." "And you?" Evelyn asked. "Are you scared?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Every single day," he finally said. "But I'm more scared of giving up. That's what makes the difference." Something in his voice settled deep inside her. Yes, that was it. The fear of failing was worse than any storm. "Well then, I reckon we'll both be all right," she said. Caleb turned and truly looked at her, and she held his gaze. In the light from the lamp, his eyes were warmer than she expected. "I reckon we will," he said. The station master came back out with a bottle and 2 tin cups. He looked from Caleb to Evelyn but kept his mouth shut. He just set the whiskey on the counter. "Storm's here to stay," he announced. "Y'all might as well make yourselves at home. It's going to be a long night." He was right. As the hours passed, the storm just got angrier. The old woman in the corner finally nodded off. The station master went to his back room, leaving Evelyn and Caleb alone with the sound of the rain. They talked for a while about small things. Caleb told her about Pine Hollow and the folks she would meet. He spoke of his ranch with a kind of cautious pride, like he was afraid to jinx it. The land was good but tough. His herd was small but strong. He was building it one head at a time. "Takes time," he said, looking into his coffee cup. He had said no to the whiskey. "Everything out here takes time. This land's got its own clock, and it don't care if you're in a hurry." "And you?" Evelyn asked. "Are you in a hurry?" He gave a faint smile. "I used to be. The war taught me to be fast. But ranchin' is different. You can't rush a calf, or the grass, or trust. It's all about being patient." "That must be hard," Evelyn said, "after the war." "You have no idea," he answered, and his tone made her wonder just how hard it really was. She told him a little about Boston, about the stuffy rules and feeling like her whole life was planned for her. She mentioned her love of books and how teaching was seen as beneath her station. "Station," Caleb repeated, as if the word tasted bad. "Out here, folks don't care where you come from, just what you can do." "I like that," Evelyn said, meaning it. Being judged on her own grit felt like a fresh start. "You'll do good," Caleb said. "Those kids need a real teacher. Most can't read their own names. You'll change things for them." "I hope so." She paused. "Caleb, can I ask you something? Your hands, the shaking, is it—" She trailed off, not wanting to be rude. "From the war," he finished for her. His voice was flat. "It comes and goes. Worse when I'm tired or cold. The doctor called it nerves, said it might pass, it might not." "Does it bother you?" she asked, then wished she could take the words back. "I'm sorry, that was—" "No, it's all right." He flexed his fingers, the tremor barely there now. "Yeah, it bothers me. Makes me feel weak, not controlling my own hands." "You're not weak," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "Weak men run. You're here, building something. That's the strongest thing there is." He looked at her, his expression hard to figure. "That's a kind thing to say." "It's not kindness. It's the truth." She met his eyes. "We all have our scars, Caleb. Yours are just easier to see." Something in his face changed. Maybe it was surprise. "What about your scars, Evelyn? The ones folks can't see?" She should have changed the subject, but instead the words came out. I was engaged to a man named Thomas Whitmore. He left me at the altar, sent his brother with a note. Caleb's jaw tightened. That's a terrible thing to do to someone. Yes, it was public. The whole city knew. I became a story people told their daughters. The girl who wasn't good enough for a wedding. That wasn't your fault, Caleb said, his voice like stone. The man's a coward. Maybe. Or maybe he saw some flaw in me. For months, she had tried to figure out what she did wrong. Or maybe, Caleb said slowly, he was a damn fool who never deserved you to begin with. Evelyn blinked, startled by the anger in his voice. You don't know me well enough to say that. Don't have to. Any man who'd leave a woman like you is a fool. That's just a fact. The certainty in his voice was a strange comfort. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome. He paused for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm glad he was a fool. If he wasn't, you wouldn't be sitting here in Wyoming fixing my shirt. He almost smiled. Might be selfish, but I'm grateful for it. A warmth spread through Evelyn's chest, and it had nothing to do with the stove. That is a little selfish, she said, but she was smiling too. She was smiling too as the storm outside finally gave up its fight. The worst of it was over. Looks like we will make it through, Caleb said, looking out at the fading darkness. I am glad I met you, she confessed. Makes this place feel less lonely. Same here, he replied. But be warned, Pine Hollow folks love to gossip. They will likely say we are married by Sunday, she laughed. Let them talk. I do not care anymore. Good, he said. Listen, my wagon is going that way. Let me take you. It is better than waiting for that busted stagecoach. She should have said no. She was tired of saying no. I would appreciate that. He grinned a little. It is not much. Held together with hope and wire. Then it will match my life perfectly, she said, and their laughter filled the small room. The stove popped at the quiet station. Outside, the rain washed the prairie clean for a new day. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt hope instead of dread for what tomorrow might bring. She was right where she needed to be. Dawn arrived pale and quiet over Wyoming. The air was so crisp it hurt to breathe. Caleb was hitching his horses to a wagon that looked exactly as he described. It was scarred and uneven, but the horses were strong and well cared for. That told her something important about the man. Told you she was not much to look at, Caleb said, seeing her stare. He wore the shirt she had mended for him. But she will get us there. I was not judging, she said. He smiled, taking the sting out of his next words. Sure looked like it from here. His hat shadowed his face, making him seem older. You ready? He asked. Evelyn looked back at the station, then made her choice. I am ready. He helped her up onto the seat. His hands were steady this morning, the shaking all but gone. The wagon groaned as it started moving, but the horses pulled with an easy strength. Soon the station was just a speck behind them. They rode in silence for the first mile. The land was huge, all rolling grass and distant mountains under a sky so big it made her feel free. This openness gets to people, Caleb said, breaking the quiet. Some cannot stand feeling so small. They run back east to their walls. And you? She asked. It does not bother me, he said, his eyes scanning the horizon. I like to see what is coming. In the city, smoke could hide a man 5 feet away. Out here, there are no corners, no surprises. Evelyn considered that. Caleb let out a short laugh. Well, except for storms, cattle thieves, and some Lakota, who are not fond of us settling on their old hunting grounds. I cannot say I blame them. Are there many problems? Evelyn asked, keeping her voice even. The stories back east were all wild tales. Caleb's tone suggested something more complex. Less than there used to be, but more than there should. He steered the team around a deep rut. Most tribes are on reservations now. The government promises them food and help, then forgets to send it. That makes for bad feelings all around. That seems wrong, Evelyn said. Caleb looked at her with a hint of approval. It is. But justice does not always ride the same trail as the frontier, Miss Moore. You will see. They rode on in silence. The sun climbed, warming the air. Evelyn was still damp and shivering. Without a word, Caleb reached back and pulled out a rough wool blanket. He handed it to her gently. "Thank you," she said, wrapping it around her shoulders. It smelled of horse and sage, a world away from her old life. "We cannot have the new schoolteacher freezing before she even starts," Caleb said. "The town council would have my hide." "Is there a real town council?" Evelyn asked. "Or is that just the men at the saloon?" He grinned. "A little of both. We have a mayor, Samuel Boone. He owns the general store. A few other men think their opinions are the most important. But things get decided wherever people gather. It sounds messy. It is, but it mostly works." He guided the horses to smoother ground. "You will meet them all. Mayor Boone's wife, Margaret, is the one who hired you. She will be on you like a hen on a June bug the minute you arrive." "Is that a warning?" Evelyn asked, a smile touching her lips. "Just preparing you. Margaret means well, but she is a lot to handle. She is from back east and thinks everything should be done by the book." Evelyn understood that feeling. "I will try not to let her down." "You will not," Caleb said with surprising certainty. "You fixed my shirt in the dark with a surgeon's steady hand. You can handle Margaret Boone." His confidence warmed her more than the blanket. After that, the conversation came easy. He pointed out landmarks and spoke of his ranch. He talked of the cabin he built and the barn he was still raising. He had plans, if his herd made it through the winter. "You speak of winter like it is an enemy," Evelyn noted. "It is," Caleb said simply. "Winter kills more folks out here than anything. People get snowed in, run out of food, and freeze just feet from their own door in a whiteout. That is why we stock up. That is why neighbors check on each other. You are trying to frighten me. I am trying to prepare you." He looked at her, his gaze serious. "The school is in town, so you will be fine. But you have to understand this land does not forgive a mistake." "Neither did Boston society," Evelyn said. "And I survived it." Something in his face changed. "Respect, perhaps?" "Fair point. Though I would still bet a Wyoming winter is kinder than Boston gossip." "You would lose that bet," she said, and they shared a smile. Later, they stopped by a swollen creek to rest the horses. Caleb offered her a canteen and a cloth bundle. Inside were hard biscuits and some dried meat. "It is not a fancy breakfast," he said. "No," she agreed, biting into a biscuit. "But it does the job." They ate by the water, the sun warming their backs. The tension from the long night finally started to leave her. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said, his voice quiet. "You have been asking me things all morning. This one is more personal." He hesitated. "That man, Thomas, who left you. You said everyone knew. Was your name in the newspapers?" Heat rose in her cheeks. "Yes. The society pages had a field day with it. They made it sound like a failed business deal." "That is why you came here," Caleb said. "To escape all that." "Wouldn't you?" she asked, her voice tight. "Imagine people whispering every time you walked by. Friends stop calling. Your own father looks at you with pity." I could not breathe anymore, Caleb. He was quiet for a long time. "I understand. After the war, I could not go back to Virginia. There were too many ghosts, too many memories of who I was and what I did. I needed a place where I could just be Caleb Rhodes, a rancher, not a veteran, not the man who—" He stopped, his jaw tight. He packed up the rest of the food with sharp, controlled movements. "We should go, still a ways to Pine Hollow." They rode on, but the air between them had changed. The easy talk was gone, replaced by a heavy silence. Evelyn found herself watching him. She saw the strong line of his jaw and how his eyes never stopped scanning the land. She realized, with a small jolt, that he was handsome. not in the polished way Thomas had been. Caleb's good looks were rugged and honest, etched by the sun and the hard life he lived. This man had lived a hard life, and it showed. "You are staring," Caleb said, not even looking at her. She felt her face get hot. "I was just thinking. Thinking can be a dangerous business." He smiled a little. "What about?" She decided to tell the truth. "I was thinking you are not what I expected." "And what was that?" "Someone rougher. The stories back east paint men out here as near savages." He laughed a real laugh. "Some are. Most of us are just trying to get by. We might not have fancy manners, but we treat folks right." "Thomas had manners," Evelyn said softly. "He knew all the rules of society. But when it came to simple decency, he was the savage one." Caleb looked at her then, his eyes full of understanding. "Being civilized is not about forks and fancy wine, Evelyn. It is about how you treat people when nobody is looking." "Is that why you moved your rifle when I came in yesterday?" she asked. "So it would not point at me?" He looked surprised, she noticed. "That is just common sense." "Exactly," she said, "civilization." Evelyn let a small smile show. That was something Thomas would have never considered. The only thing he ever held was a letter opener. Caleb asked, "So you prefer the man holding the rifle?" His voice was casual, but his eyes showed a sliver of doubt. Evelyn looked straight at him. "I prefer the man who helps folks even when he does not have to. What he is holding does not matter." A flush rose in Caleb's weathered face, and he turned to fiddle with the horses. But she saw the smile he fought to hide, and a warmth spread through her. By afternoon, the prairie land began to roll into hills dotted with scrub pine and cedar. They rode past a few homesteads, simple cabins with smoke rising from their chimneys. Folks waved from their porches, and Caleb waved right back, calling out their names. "It seems you know everyone," Evelyn said. "Small territory," he replied. "You get to know your neighbors, like it or not." He pointed to a cabin larger than the others with a solid barn. "That is the Johnson place. You will be teaching their 3 children. They are a good, hard-working family. The father was a Buffalo soldier, came here after his service." "A Buffalo soldier?" Evelyn asked. "He was in a black cavalry regiment," Caleb explained. "Fought in the Indian Wars. Henry Johnson served well, earned his land, and built a good life. Some people were not happy about it. There is still a mean streak in folks out here, but Henry is too stubborn to care. Besides, his wife Sarah could outshoot half the men in these parts. People learned to mind their own business." Evelyn heard the respect in his tone. "You like them?" "I respect them," he corrected. "There is a difference." He glanced her way. "You will find Pine Hollow has all kinds of people. Folks from the East like you, immigrants from all over, and former slaves looking for a new start. This town, Pine Hollow, was a mix of folks, hard workers and believers all thrown together. Mostly they got along, but people are people. You need your neighbors out here, and that helps smooth things over." When they topped the hill, Evelyn saw the town scattered below. A main street cut through the center with a general store, a saloon, and a hotel. At the far end, a white church stood tall. Next to it was a smaller building with a bell on top. Caleb pointed. "That is the schoolhouse. You will have about 20 students from 6 to 14 years old." Evelyn stared at the little building. It was her new beginning, or her end. It looked so small and fragile. "I can do this," she whispered. "I know you can," Caleb said. As they rolled into town, she felt eyes on them. Folks stopped what they were doing to watch them pass. Some women whispered behind their hands. Caleb murmured, "Small town. You are the biggest news we have had in a while." "That is quite a story," Evelyn said softly. "You should hear the other version," he chuckled. Despite her nerves, Evelyn had to smile. "Which one is true?" "Probably neither," he said. "The truth is usually not as exciting." He stopped the horses in front of a building signed Boone's Mercantile. He said, "Get ready for Margaret." Before he could even set the brake, the door flew open. A short, round woman marched out. She looked as if she'd been waiting for them all day. "Miss Moore," she called out. "We were so worried when the stage did not arrive." "Found her at Bridger Station, Mrs. Boone," Caleb said, helping Evelyn down. "A storm held us up." Margaret Boone's eyes missed nothing. "How lucky," she said, her tone full of suspicion. "Well, come inside. You must be tired." She dismissed Caleb with a firm thank you. He tipped his hat. "Miss Moore, welcome to Pine Hollow." "Thank you for everything," Evelyn said, and she truly meant it. For a moment, something passed between them. Then Caleb was gone, leaving Evelyn to face the town. She watched him go, maybe a little too long. Margaret Boone took her arm. "Let's get you inside." Inside the store, Evelyn met Mayor Boone, a quiet man. Then she was shown to a small, clean room upstairs. It would be her home for now. Margaret brought water and towels. She also brought a steady stream of information about the town and the school. She stressed the importance of a good reputation. "Mr. Rhodes is a good man," Margaret said carefully. "But he is not married. As the teacher, you must be an example." "Mrs. Boone," Evelyn interrupted gently, "Mr. Rhodes was a gentleman. Nothing improper happened. I trust people here will not create a scandal." Margaret blinked. Then she smiled. "You have some fight in you, Miss Moore. Good. You are going to need it." "I am ready," Evelyn said, surprised that she was. In the next few hours, Margaret took Evelyn all around the town. Evelyn met what felt like everyone in Pine Hollow. Dr. Chen and the Johnson family, who came in from their farm just to meet her. The names and faces all started to blur together, but she found herself looking for one specific person. One tall man in a worn hat. Caleb lived 5 miles away, but he had to come to town sometimes. "Looking for someone?" Margaret asked with a knowing look. Evelyn felt her face get warm. "Just trying to get my bearings." "Well," Margaret said, "Mr. Rhodes usually comes in for supplies on Saturdays. That is 2 days from now." "I was not wondering," Evelyn started, but then she stopped. "He was kind to me. I want to thank him properly." Margaret's expression softened. "He is a good man. The war was hard on him, but he is building a fine ranch." Evelyn wanted to ask more, but Margaret was already leading her to the schoolhouse. It was just one room with rough benches and a desk. Slates and a few old books were on a shelf. It was not much. "It is not much," Margaret said, reading Evelyn's face, "but it is yours. The town will pay you $20 a month on top of room and board. You will take your meals with different families on a rotation. It helps you get to know the children and their folks. $20 a month." In Boston, she had paid more for a single pair of gloves, but here in this small building that smelled of wood smoke and chalk, it felt like a fortune. "It is perfect," she said with genuine feeling. Margaret seemed pleased. "School begins on Monday, so you have the weekend to get ready. My husband will bring your supplies tomorrow. The children are ready to learn, Miss Moore. Do not let them fool you." After Margaret left, Evelyn stood alone, tracing the scars on the teacher's desk. The wood was marked with initials and drawings, the history of children who had sat there before. She thought of Thomas, who only wanted her as a beautiful ornament for his parties. He never once asked what she dreamed of. Then she thought of Caleb. He had listened to her, had trusted her with his own troubles. He saw her as a person to know, not a thing to own. The difference was everything. Through the window she saw the distant mountains, purple and full of promise. Somewhere out there, 5 miles from town, Caleb was likely tending his stock, fighting his own quiet battles. And Evelyn Moore, once a Boston socialite, stood in a frontier schoolhouse, and for the first time in a long while, she truly smiled. That Saturday morning, a chill in the air turned her breath to mist. Evelyn was up before the sun, a bundle of nerves in her best-mended dress. She'd spent all day Friday getting the little schoolhouse ready, but today was the day Caleb was due in town. She told herself she just wanted to thank him properly for his help. But as she fussed with her hair for the 3rd time, she knew she was a terrible liar. The mercantile was bustling when she walked in. She pretended to look at books, but her eyes kept darting to the door. An hour slipped by, then another. She bought a novel she could not afford, just for an excuse to stay. Suddenly, Margaret Boone was at her elbow. "He will be here," she said softly. "Caleb is a man of his word." Evelyn wanted to pretend she was not waiting, but Margaret's knowing look stopped her. "I only meant to thank him," Evelyn said, trying to sound dignified. Just as she was about to give up, the door swung open. Caleb walked in, looking more tired than he had 2 days before. But when his eyes met hers, he smiled, and a knot in her chest came undone. "Miss Moore," he said, tipping his hat, "I did not figure on seeing you here." She held up her purchase. "I needed a book, and I wanted to say thank you again." He chuckled. "You already did, a few times, I recall." They just stood there with the whole town watching what was unfolding between them. Back in Boston, this would have been a scandal. Here it was just two people and a truth they could not hide. "Would you care for a walk?" Caleb asked suddenly. "I could show you the real Pine Hollow." She should have said no, for goodness sake. But instead she heard herself say, "I would like that very much." As they left, Evelyn knew Margaret was already planning their wedding. With Caleb by her side, the muddy little town looked different. It looked like home. He pointed out the town's secrets, like the card game at the saloon, and the spot where kids snuck smokes. "You know everyone's business," she laughed. "Small town," he answered with a shrug. "Secrets do not stay secret for long." "By sundown, the whole town will be talking," he said. "Does the gossip worry you?" Evelyn asked. He steered her around a mud puddle. "It used to. But I learned folks talk when they're bored. The people who matter don't listen to it." They stopped at the edge of town by a creek, where a rough bench sat under some cottonwood trees. Caleb motioned to it, and they sat. "I come here when things get to be too much," he said. The place was quiet. The sun cut through the tree branches, making everything glow. "Can I ask you something personal?" Evelyn finally said. He gave a small smile. "Seems to be a habit of yours." She looked at his hands. "The shaking, does it hurt?" His smile vanished. He flexed his fingers. "No, not in a physical way. Some days it is barely there. Other days I cannot hold my coffee." He sighed. "The doctor said it was nerve damage from the war. It might heal, it might not." "What happened?" she asked gently. He was quiet for a long time, then took a deep breath. "I was a sharpshooter at Gettysburg. They put me in a barn loft with a rifle. My job was to take out the other side's cannon crews. I was good at it, Evelyn, too good. I could hit a target from 300 yards away. After 3 days of it, my hands started shaking. And they never stopped." The cold truth of his words chilled her. She knew he was a veteran, but this made it terribly real. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "Do not be." His voice was firm. "I knew what I signed up for. But doing your duty always costs a man something." Evelyn gently reached out and took his trembling hand. He froze, as if afraid to breathe. "You are not that man anymore," she told him. "How can you be so sure?" he asked, his voice strained. "How do you know the war did not hollow me out?" "Because you are building a life here, not destroying one. You care for your animals, and you speak of others with respect. That is how I know." Caleb just stared at her. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," she replied softly. They sat holding hands, a comfortable silence between them. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, not letting go. "The real story." Caleb chuckled. The sound seemed to loosen something in his shoulders. "It is a beautiful mess. I have 50 cattle, and most of them are as ornery as a mule. The cabin roof leaks, and the barn is only half built because my money and my lumber ran out at the same time." "But you love it," Evelyn stated. It was not a question. "I do," he admitted. "When I step outside in the morning, it is just me and the land. For the first time since the war, I feel like myself again. Just Caleb." I understand, she said. That is how the schoolhouse feels to me. I'm not a scandal or a runaway. I'm just a teacher. And that is enough. It is more than enough, Caleb said, his gaze intense. You are more than enough, Evelyn. Her breath caught. Every sensible part of her screamed that this was too fast. She should pull her hand away and leave. Instead, she squeezed his hand tighter and whispered, "So are you." A moment later, the sound of children's voices broke the spell. They jumped apart just as the three Johnson kids came bursting through the trees. "Hello, Mr. Rhodes. Hello, Miss Moore," said Grace, the oldest. "We were looking for crawdads in the creek." "You are not interrupting," Evelyn said, though her face was warm. "What on earth are crawdads?" The children stared at her as if she had two heads. "You do not know crawdads?" little Thomas asked, his eyes wide. "Well then, you will have to teach me," Evelyn said, standing up. "My education is clearly lacking." The children beamed. For the next hour, Evelyn was crouched by the water, learning to spot the little creatures under the rocks. Grace was a patient teacher, while Samuel provided a steady stream of facts. Thomas just splashed. Caleb watched them, a grin on his face. When Evelyn finally caught one, she held it up in triumph. "That is a fine one, Miss Moore," Grace said with approval. "High praise," Caleb murmured to Evelyn. Grace does not give out compliments easily. Evelyn smiled, releasing the crawdad. Her dress was damp and her hands were muddy, but she had not felt so happy in a very long time. Sarah Johnson, the children's mother, arrived to call them for lunch, her greeting warm and friendly. "I hope they were not a bother." "Not at all," Evelyn promised. "They gave me a very important lesson." "We are glad you are here, Miss Moore," she said. "The children need someone who cares." Evelyn later learned what she meant. Caleb explained that the teacher before her had refused to teach the Johnson children, all because of the color of their skin. The town had run him off, but the hurt remained. "That is just plain wrong," Evelyn said, her voice hot with anger. "Prejudice is everywhere," Caleb said quietly. "But you will do better. I know it." As they walked back, Caleb got quiet, struggling with his words. "Evelyn," he finally said, "there is a church social in 2 weeks. I was hoping I could take you." This was it. The moment everything could change. She thought of her old life, of promises made and broken by men who asked for permission but never for her heart. Caleb just stood there, hat in his hands, waiting for her answer. "Yes," she breathed out. "I would be honored." A smile lit up his entire face. "Yeah?" "Yeah," she said, smiling right back. They stood there grinning like a couple of fools until Margaret cleared her throat from the mercantile doorway. "Mr. Rhodes, your supplies are ready, and Miss Moore, the mayor, is looking for you." Caleb put his hat back on. "I will see you at the social then. 2 weeks." Evelyn nodded. 2 weeks. He loaded his wagon, and with one last look and a tip of his hat, he was gone. Those next 2 weeks flew by. The first day of school was wild, with 20 children of all ages. But Evelyn found her footing, turning chaos into a real classroom. The children tested her, of course. Samuel put a frog in her desk, and the Schmidt boys pretended they only spoke German. But slowly they started to trust her. Grace Johnson was a brilliant student, and young Thomas, who struggled with his letters, could figure numbers in his head faster than anyone. Evelyn was not just waiting for a dance. She was building a life. Katie Anderson wrote stories that were surprisingly deep. Each night, Evelyn ate with a different family, learning the hard-earned rhythms of their lives. She learned to cook venison with the Andersons and make strudel with the Schmidts. She listened to Henry Johnson tell old cavalry stories that left the children wide-eyed. All the while, she thought about the social, about dancing, and about Caleb's hand holding hers. Margaret helped her alter a dress, fixing a hem ruined by mud and adding some lace. By Boston standards, it was plain. But out here, it was beautiful. When Evelyn saw her reflection, she saw a new woman. The one who arrived weeks ago was running from something. This woman was building something. The morning of the social was crisp and cold. Evelyn's stomach was a mess of nerves. She muttered to her reflection, "You would think I had never been to a dance." But those dances in Boston were stiff, controlled affairs. This felt different. This felt real. By 5 o'clock, folks were gathering at the church. The pews were pushed aside for dancing. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow. A few musicians were tuning up, full of more heart than skill. Evelyn stood by the door, feeling a wave of doubt. What if he had changed his mind? What if you look beautiful? She turned, and her breath caught. It was Caleb, cleaned up and freshly shaved, his hair combed neat. He wore the very shirt she had mended for him. He offered his arm. "You look mighty fine yourself," she said. "Had to do right by my date," he answered. And that one word, date, warmed her through and through. When they walked in, the room went quiet for a beat. Then the chatter started again, but Evelyn felt all the eyes on them, sizing them up. "Ignore them," Caleb murmured. "Just look at me." "That will not help the gossip," she whispered back. "Let them gossip. I have the prettiest woman in the territory on my arm." Before she could answer, Margaret Boone came over and started introducing Evelyn around. A weathered rancher named Hank clapped Caleb on the shoulder. "So you are the one who has Rhodes all spruced up," he said with a twinkle in his eye. "About time someone civilized him." "I'm not trying to civilize him," Evelyn said plainly. "I rather like him as he is." Caleb's expression softened at that. Hank let out a big laugh. "She is a keeper, Rhodes. Do not mess it up." The music started, a lively, joyful tune. It was not the formal waltz of a Boston ballroom. Folks were swinging and stomping, laughing when they missed a step. "I should warn you," Caleb said. "I am not much of a dancer." "Then we will figure it out together," Evelyn replied, pulling him onto the floor. Their first few minutes were a clumsy mess. Caleb's hands were shaking, and Evelyn kept trying to lead with Boston steps that did not belong here. They stepped on each other's toes and nearly ran into another couple. But then Caleb laughed, a real unguarded sound. Evelyn relaxed. This was not about being perfect. It was about being together. They found a rhythm that was all their own. It was not graceful, but it was theirs. Later they stood by a long table heavy with food. There was German potato salad next to Chinese dumplings and Irish soda bread. It was a feast made by families proud to share a piece of their old homes. "This is wonderful," Evelyn said. "In Boston, you would never see such a mix." "Out here," Caleb said, "survival makes for some strange potluck companions." Their talk was cut short by a commotion at the door. Raised voices quieted the room. A group of men entered, led by a man she did not recognize. He was tall and well-dressed, and he walked with an air of pure arrogance, a coldness that made her shiver. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. Caleb's face had hardened. "Warren Blackwood. He owns the big ranch south of here." "You do not like him," Evelyn stated. "Nobody likes him, but he has money, so folks put up with him." Caleb's jaw was tight. "He has been trying to buy up the smaller ranches. He offered me double what my place is worth last month." "But you said no." "Of course I said no. I built that place from nothing." Caleb's voice was low and fierce. "But he is not a man who takes no for an answer." Blackwood scanned the room like he owned it, and his eyes landed right on Evelyn. He started walking toward them. "Here we go," Caleb muttered under his breath. "Mr. Rhodes," Blackwood said, his voice slick as oil. "And who is this lovely lady?" "Miss Evelyn Moore," Caleb said, his voice flat. "The new schoolteacher." "Charmed," Blackwood said, taking her hand with a flowery bow. "A schoolteacher from Boston, I hear. You must find all this terribly primitive." His words suggested sympathy, but his eyes were challenging her. "Actually, I find it refreshing," Evelyn said, her voice cool. "There is an honesty here I appreciate." Blackwood's smile never faltered. "How diplomatic. Tell me, Miss Moore, has Rhodes here been showing you a good time?" The way he said it made it sound like an accusation. Evelyn felt Caleb tense beside her. beside him. "Mr. Rhodes has been a good friend, helping me get my bearings," she said, her voice steady. "I'm mighty grateful for it." "Friendship?" Blackwood drawled, savoring the word. "How sweet. Still, a woman like you, with your clear breeding, might prefer company that's a bit more established. I'd be glad to call on you, Miss Moore. Show you how a real ranch is run." The jab at Caleb was plain as day. Evelyn felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice cutting through the nearby chatter, "I appreciate your offer, but I'm perfectly happy with the company I keep. Mr. Rhodes has shown me kindness and respect. I value those qualities a sight more than the size of a man's land or his wallet." A hush fell over their little corner of the room. Blackwood's smile stiffened. Caleb's hand found hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I see," Blackwood said, his voice soft and cold. "A woman of quality, tying herself to—" He waved a dismissive hand toward Caleb. "Well, this country changes folks, I suppose. Lowers their standards. Or raises them," Evelyn countered. "Depends on what a person values." Blackwood just stared at her, but she didn't look away. Finally, he gave a mocking little bow. "Enjoy your evening." He turned on his heel and stalked off, his men trailing behind him like stray dogs. The moment he left, the whispers started up. Evelyn realized her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the thrill of the fight. She'd just made a powerful enemy. But seeing the pride and worry mixed in Caleb's eyes, she didn't regret it one bit. "You didn't have to do that," Caleb said, his voice low. "Yes, I did. He looked down on you." She held his hand tighter. "And I meant every word I said." "You're going to stir up a hornet's nest, Miss Moore," Caleb said, but a slow smile spread across his face. "Good," she replied. "Let's stir it up together." When the music started again, something was different. That little showdown had changed things between them. They danced closer, the hesitation gone. Caleb's hands were steady on her back, and the look in his eyes made her heart beat a little faster. They danced until the room was nearly empty and the music turned soft and low. "Evelyn," Caleb murmured, his voice so quiet she almost missed it. "This is going to sound plumb crazy. We've only known each other a short while, but I have to tell you—" "Don't," she whispered. She knew what was coming, and it both thrilled and terrified her. "Not yet. Not here." He understood. She saw it in his eyes. He nodded and pulled her just a bit closer. When the last song ended, Caleb walked her back to the Mercantile. The street was quiet, lit only by the moon. At her door, he stopped. "Evelyn, about what I was fixin' to say—" "I know," she said softly. "And I feel it too, but let's not rush this." "Even though the whole town is already talking?" he asked with a small grin. "Especially because of that. Let's give them something real to talk about." She reached up, her palm resting against the stubble on his cheek. "Come see me. Court me properly. Let me learn about you, and let me show you who I really am." Caleb leaned into her touch, pressing a soft kiss into her palm. "You make me want to be a better man," he said quietly. "You make me forget what it feels like to be alone." The words went straight to her heart. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, that she never knew a feeling this strong could happen so fast. But she held her tongue. "Good night, Caleb," she whispered. "Good night, Evelyn." She went inside and listened as his footsteps faded away. Through the window, she watched his wagon roll off toward his ranch 5 miles out. And Evelyn Moore, who thought she knew all about falling in love, realized she hadn't known a thing. This feeling, this wild, terrifying rush that made you want to laugh and cry at the same time, this was the real deal, and she prayed they would both survive the fall. The weeks that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. Caleb rode into town every Saturday, and Evelyn found herself watching the road for his wagon. They walked and they talked, slowly learning about the people they used to be. He told her about Virginia, and the farm his family lost in the war. He spoke of his mother's gardens, his father's pride, and the brother who died at Antietam. He admitted he had enlisted at 17, lying about his age because he believed in the cause. He never imagined that hunting rabbits would teach him how to fight men. In turn, Evelyn told him about being a society daughter in Boston, always expected to marry well. She confessed her engagement to Thomas had been more about duty than love. It never turned into the real thing, she said one afternoon by the creek. When he left me at the altar, the worst part wasn't the shame. Underneath it all, I felt relief. I was free from a life of pretending. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Is that why you came west? To stop pretending? To find out who I am when no one is watching, she said. To build something that is all mine. Does that sound selfish? Sounds brave, Caleb answered, his blue eyes full of understanding. Most people just live the life they're handed. You're building your own. That takes guts. So are you, Evelyn pointed out. The war took everything. My folks, our farm, my brother's buried way out in Maryland. Virginia's just full of ghosts. He stared at the slight tremor in his hands. Out here I am just another fella trying to make a go of it. This little shake, well, half the men my age carry some piece of the war with them. Nobody gives it a second glance. Evelyn gently said, You are not broken. No, Caleb agreed, but I am not whole neither. I left pieces of myself on those battlefields. Sometimes at night I can still smell the gunpowder. Those ghosts followed me all the way out here. Evelyn took his hand, her fingers fitting between his. We all carry ghosts, Caleb. Maybe we are not supposed to outrun them. Maybe we are supposed to build a life so strong they do not own us anymore. He looked down at their joined hands. When did you get so wise? I am just figuring things out, same as you. She gave a small smile. Besides, a truly wise woman would not be falling for some stubborn rancher who cannot even sew a straight seam. The words hung in the air. Then Caleb gave a real, honest-to-goodness smile. Good thing I am falling for a headstrong teacher who thinks chasing down critters is a school lesson. Joy washed over her. It builds character, she said. So does mending shirts, Caleb shot back, and their laughter floated out over the prairie. October turned into November, bringing the first bite of a Wyoming winter. Margaret Boone showed up at breakfast looking serious, holding a list. Winter out here is not like back in Boston, she said, laying the paper down like it was gospel. You will need warmer things, extra blankets, and food at the schoolhouse in case a blizzard hits. The teacher before last got snowed in for 3 days with 6 children. They made do with dried apples and melted snow, not on my watch. Evelyn looked at the long list. This is going to cost a pretty penny. The school fund will cover the basics, Margaret told her, but most teachers take on extra jobs. The territory salary only goes so far. That afternoon, Evelyn put up a notice at the store offering tutoring and needlework. Soon she was helping 3 students with their reading and embroidering pillowcases for Mrs. Chen. The extra work was tiring, but it meant she could buy what she needed. Caleb saw how worn out she was when he rode into town that Saturday. She was in the schoolhouse, buried in paperwork, and did not hear him until he knocked. Lord have mercy, Evelyn, you look plumb tuckered out, he said. Good morning to you too, she replied. I am serious, he said, stepping inside. You have got dark circles under your eyes. What is going on? Just getting ready for winter, she said lightly. It takes more planning than I figured. Caleb saw the stacks of papers in her little ledger book. He understood right away. You are working yourself to the bone for supplies. I am being practical, Evelyn said. The school fund is a help, but I have got to pull my own weight. No one thinks you are a charity case, he said, his voice full of concern. But you cannot run yourself ragged trying to prove a point. This country is tough enough. It is not about proving a point, she shot back. I need to show folks I can make it out here, so they do not see me as some city girl who will run home at the first sign of trouble. Who cares what they see? The people who count, the families who trust you with their kids. They already know you belong. It matters to me, she whispered. I need to prove I am more than the woman Thomas decided was not worth keeping a promise to. Caleb's face softened. He sat down and took her hands. Evelyn, you do not have to prove a thing to anyone. Not this town, and sure as heck not to Thomas. You are already more than he ever deserved. You are teaching children who have never had a real teacher before. You are building a life all on your own." Tears stung her eyes. "Then why does it not feel like enough?" "Because healing takes a long time," Caleb said gently. "Trust me, I know. Every time my hands shake so bad I cannot button my own shirt, I feel like I'm not enough. Like I am still that broken soldier. But then I look at my ranch, the cabin I built with these shaky hands, and I remember. Healing is not about being perfect. It is about showing up each day and doing the work." Evelyn looked at their hands, his calloused and hers stained with ink. "When did you learn all that?" "Still learning," he admitted, "but it got a little easier after I met you. Having someone who sees past the scars helps more than you know." She squeezed his hand. "I see you, Caleb, all of you, and you are more than enough." "So are you," he said. Then almost shyly he asked, "Would you come see it?" "The ranch. I know it is not proper, you coming out there alone. I could pick you up Friday after school. Have you back by Saturday?" "Yes," Evelyn cut in. "I would love to see it, and we do not need a chaperone. I am tired of letting proper get in my way." Caleb grinned wide. "You are going to set the whole territory to talking." "Good," she said. "Let them talk." That Friday, Evelyn sent her students home early. She packed a small bag, telling Margaret she was visiting a family nearby, which was not exactly a lie. Caleb pulled up in a clean wagon, his horses brushed till they shined. He helped her onto the seat, his hands strong and steady on hers. The ride stretched past 5 miles, closer to 7. The road was just a faint trail through the prairie grass. But when they reached the ridge, Evelyn saw why Caleb picked this spot. The land was beautiful, with a creek running through it and his small cabin tucked against a hill. A curl of smoke rose from the stone chimney. Next to it was a half-finished barn and a corral with a few head of cattle. "It ain't much," Caleb said, his voice hesitant. "But it's home." Evelyn meant it when she said, "Caleb, it is perfect." He gave her a slow smile and led her inside. The cabin was simple but cozy, with a bed, a small table, and a stove. What caught her eye was a stack of books. "You are a reader," she said, surprised. "Helps keep the bad memories at bay," he admitted. She saw titles she knew from back home and felt a connection to this quiet man. "I have something to tell you," she began. Evelyn turned to face him. "I have been writing letters to my father that I never mail. I tell him all about my life out here." She took a breath. "And I tell him about you." Caleb stood completely still. "What do you say about me?" he asked. "That you are a good, stubborn man. That with you I feel like myself for the first time." Her voice shook a little. "I am falling in love with you, and it scares me." The room was silent. Then in just a few quick steps, Caleb was in front of her. He gently held her face in his hands. "I fell for you the night you helped me with that needle," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Words are not my strong suit, Evelyn. Let me show you." He kissed her with a longing that had been held back for months. When they parted, he rested his forehead on hers. "I have never been more sure of anything. I love you, Evelyn." Tears of pure joy ran down her face. "I love you too." In that little cabin with the wind howling outside, she felt safe and warm in his arms. They talked for hours that night. Caleb spoke of his plans to grow the ranch. Evelyn told him her dream of starting a library for the local children. "Everyone deserves to have stories," she explained, her eyes shining. "That is a fine dream," Caleb said softly. He was quiet for a moment. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you dream of, besides this ranch?" His voice was low. "A family. A home that is filled with laughter instead of ghosts." Evelyn could picture it so clearly it made her ache. Children with his eyes and her spirit. It was not a scary thought. It felt like coming home. That sounds wonderful, she whispered. He turned and looked right at her. Does it? With me? She walked over to him, her heart full. Looking up into his hopeful eyes, she said with all her certainty, "It sounds wonderful with you." "Only with you," she repeated. He pulled her into a tight hug, his relief a tangible thing. They shared a simple meal, their knees touching under the small table. He told her about a new calf born that morning. She told him how one of her students had finally learned to write his name. Later, as she read to him by the fire, he grew serious. "Evelyn, I need to tell you about Warren Blackwood." She put down the book. "What is it?" "He is causing trouble," Caleb said. "Some of my cattle go missing after his men show up. Supplies I order never arrive." "Because you would not sell him your land," she realized. "That and because of you," Caleb added. "He does not like being told no, especially by a woman in public." A chill went down Evelyn's spine. "Has he threatened you?" "Not with words," Caleb said, his jaw tight. "Men like him just apply pressure until you break. But I will not break. And I will not let him use you to hurt me. I just need you to know what you're getting into." Things could get complicated. Back in Boston, Evelyn would have hated the idea of a public fight. But this was different. This was about Caleb's land, his survival. "Then we will face it together," she said, her voice firm. "I am done letting powerful men decide my future." Caleb looked at her with an affection that made her heart ache. "Are you certain?" "Once you commit to this life, there is no going back to Boston." "I do not want the easy path," Evelyn replied. "I want the real one, building something that matters with a true partner. If Warren Blackwood wants trouble, let him try. We will face him together." Caleb pulled her into his arms. "I do not deserve you." "Probably not," she teased, making him laugh. "But you have me anyway." That night she slept in his bed while he took the floor. In the morning, coffee was already brewing. "You did not have to sleep on the floor," she said. "Yes, I did," Caleb replied, pouring 2 cups. "I love you, Evelyn, and I will marry you. But I will not compromise your honor before it is official. You deserve better than town gossip." "I thought we did not care about gossip," she pointed out. "We do not care about baseless talk," he corrected. "But I will not give them ammunition. I will do this the right way." The old-fashioned courtesy made her smile. "My father will probably be relieved I found anyone to have me after the Thomas disaster." "Then he is a fool," Caleb said flatly. In the daylight, Caleb showed her the ranch. She met the stubborn, smelly cattle. She saw the careful work he put into the barn. He walked the property lines with her, explaining water rights with a teacher's patience. "You could teach," Evelyn observed. "You explain things very clearly." Caleb looked surprised. "Teaching? No, I am a rancher." "You could be both. The territory needs teachers with practical skills." She could see the idea begin to grow in his mind. "I will think about it," he said. They headed back to town around noon. "When can I see you again?" he asked as Pine Hollow came into view. "Tomorrow is Sunday," she smiled. "You could come to church?" "I might do that," Caleb said thoughtfully. "It has been a while since I sat in a pew." "God might not want to hear from a man like me." "Caleb, God wants to hear from everyone," Evelyn said softly. "But I want you there with me." He chuckled. "You just want someone to trade looks with during the temperance sermon. That is mighty scandalous, Miss Moore." "Well, I am a scandalous woman, Mr. Rhodes." As they reached the store, Caleb helped her down. "Before you go," he said, grabbing her hand, "are you sure about this? Once we make this official, your good name is tied to mine, and with Blackwood stirring up trouble, things could get rough." Evelyn looked at this good, stubborn man who saw the real her. She thought of the life she left, where reputation was everything. Then right there on Main Street, she stood on her toes and gave him a kiss for the whole town to see. I am sure, she said. His laugh was the last thing she heard as she walked into the store, where Margaret Boone was waiting with a look that was half scolding and half cheer. For the first time, Evelyn felt truly free. Margaret stood with her arms crossed, looking like she had won a prize. Well, she said, I see you have never been one for keeping secrets, Miss Moore. I find secrets are a waste of time, Evelyn smiled. Margaret's face softened. You love that man, do not you? More than I ever thought I could. Good. He needs a woman with backbone, and you need a man who sees your fire. But you ought to know, Warren Blackwood was in here. He was asking all sorts of questions about you two. He is not a happy man. A chill went down Evelyn's spine, but she held her head high. Then he will just have to get used to being unhappy. That is not how men like him work, she warned. Be careful. Evelyn knew she was right. She had made a powerful enemy and tied her life to the one man he wanted to break. In her old life, this would have been the end. But here, feeling the ghost of Caleb's kiss, she knew some things were worth the fight. Some people were worth all the risk. Sunday morning was cold and clear. Evelyn dressed with care, knowing today was a turning point. If Caleb came to church and they sat together, the whole territory would know. She greeted the families she knew, her community, as they filled the small church. Some of their smiles held a little too much knowing, but she did not mind. She saved a spot next to her in the pew, a hopeful little space. Just as the Reverend was about to start, the door creaked open. Every head in the place turned. Caleb Rhoda stood there, hat in his hands, looking determined. His eyes found hers, and she gave him a small smile. He walked right down the aisle with everyone watching and slid in beside her. Morning, he whispered. Good morning, she said back. Their hands found each other, a silent promise. The whispers started right away, a wave of gossip washing over the pews. Margaret Boone, a few rows up, gave a single approving nod. But from the back, Evelyn felt Warren Blackwood's cold stare like ice on her skin. She just squeezed Caleb's hand a little tighter. After the service, folks gathered outside in the thin winter sun. Many offered warm congratulations. Henry Johnson clapped Caleb on the back. It is about time you found a good woman, Rhodess. Makes all the difference. I know it, Caleb said, his voice thick with thanks. Just as they were about to leave, Warren Blackwood walked up with two of his hired men. The friendly chatter died down. Rhodess? Blackwood said with a false smile. Miss Moore, how nice to see you two looking so comfortable. Blackwood, Caleb said, his voice flat. I just wanted to say congratulations on your little arrangement, Blackwood drawled. The struggling rancher and the pretty school teacher. It is a sweet story. We appreciate the thought, Evelyn cut in, her voice cool as ice. But I'm sure you have better things to do. Oh, I always have time for my neighbors, he said, his eyes glinting. Which reminds me, Rhodess, my offer on your land still stands. You could take the money and start fresh somewhere a little less challenging for a man of your limitations. The insult hung in the air. Caleb's jaw was tight as a drum, but before he could speak, Evelyn stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood, she said clearly, Mr. Rhodess has already told you no. Repeatedly. That is just harassment, not business. Blackwood spun toward her, his face a mix of shock and anger. This is not your concern, Miss Moore. This is between men. It is my concern when a bully strong-arms a man I care about, Evelyn shot back. The church folks went dead quiet, all eyes on the showdown. Your worry over Mr. Rhodes's trouble sure is new, showing up right after he would not sell. As if you are using his time in the war against him. Blackwood's face went dark. You best be careful, Miss Moore. You are new here. I understand just fine, Evelyn said, her voice holding steady. Big men always try to scare smaller ones. It is the same in Boston as it is here. The difference is, out here, I do not have to pretend I do not see it. For a second, Blackwood looked ready to swing, his fists clenched tight. Caleb stepped closer, but Blackwood got a hold of himself. You have made your feelings clear, Miss Moore. I hope you do not regret it when winter comes. He tipped his hat with false politeness and stormed off, his men right behind him. The instant he was gone, whispers broke out everywhere. Henry Johnson came over looking worried. That was brave, but maybe not smart. Blackwood is a bad man to cross. So am I, Evelyn said, though her knees felt shaky. Sarah Johnson touched her arm. We are with you, both of you. It is past time someone stood up to that man. A few others nodded with them, the Schmidts, the O'Malley's, and even Mayor Boone. But some families slipped away, not wanting to pick a side. Still, enough stayed to give her hope. Thank you, Caleb said, his voice thick with feeling. You are one of our own, Henry told him. That is what being neighbors is all about. Dinner at the Andersons' place was quiet. Mrs. Anderson served chicken and potatoes with a determined smile, trying to make things feel normal. In the kitchen, young Katie Anderson asked Evelyn, Are you really going to marry Mr. Rhodes? He has not asked me yet, Evelyn answered. But if he does, I will. Even with Mr. Blackwood being so angry. Evelyn thought for a moment. Katie, I have spent my whole life doing what other people wanted. It made them happy, but I was miserable. I will not live like that anymore. My mama says Mr. Rhodes is a good man, Katie said. Your mama is right, and we all deserve to be happy. Sometimes that means you have to stand up to folks who want to keep you down. Is that why you are a teacher? Katie asked. To help people stand up? Evelyn laughed. In a way, yes. The more you know, the less folks can push you around. The more you know, the harder it is for anyone to boss you. Katie nodded. Then I will learn everything. That is the spirit, Evelyn said, meaning it completely. The next week was full of tension. Caleb started showing up at the schoolhouse more often, with flimsy excuses about needing supplies. They both knew he was just checking on her, making sure Blackwood had not caused any trouble. Evelyn found she did not mind him looking out for her. It was one thing to be treated like you were weak, and another to be protected by someone who loves you. During his visits, they planned their future. Caleb wanted to court her through the winter and marry in the spring. That is almost 6 months away, she said one afternoon. Why wait? I want to do this right, Caleb told her. I need to finish the barn and add a room to the cabin. I want to save some money so you're not marrying into hardship. He looked vulnerable for a moment. And I want to write your father to ask for his blessing. My father will be glad, Evelyn said with a smile. He will probably be relieved someone wants me. But Caleb, I do not need a big house or money. I just need you. I have to do this, Caleb said firmly. Not for you, but for me. I need to know I'm giving you something real. Let me build that for us. She saw then it was about his own pride, his need to prove he was more than just a veteran with shaky hands. All right, she said softly. But you have to promise me one thing. Promise me we will face whatever trouble comes, together. We share the hard times, not just the good ones. Caleb pulled her in for a kiss on the forehead. I promise, though I might still be a little overprotective. And I can ignore you when you are, she teased back, making him laugh. That promise was tested just a few weeks later. Caleb showed up at the schoolhouse in the middle of the day, his face like a thundercloud. What is wrong? Evelyn asked, meeting him outside. Half my cattle are gone, he said flatly. The fences were cut in 3 spots. Someone ran them off last night. Her blood went cold. Blackwood? She whispered. Cannot prove it, but who else? Caleb's hands were shaking. That herd was a whole year's work, Evelyn. It was the money for the winter, for the house. Without them, I am nearly broke. Then we will find them, Evelyn said, her voice hard as steel. Has anyone else lost cattle? Henry Johnson lost a few last week. He thought they just wandered off. Now, I'm not so sure. We have to go to the sheriff, someone insisted. This has become theft. The sheriff is in Blackwood's pocket, Caleb said with bitterness. A complaint will only make things worse for us. Evelyn's mind raced. Power out here was raw, but every powerful man had a weakness. Then we do not go to the sheriff, she said slowly. We go to his customers, Blackwood sells his beef to the army and the railroads. What if word gets out that he is a cattle thief? Caleb stared at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. You want to start a rumor? I want to fight fire with fire. Blackwood has used his influence against you. Let us make his reputation so toxic that his influence disappears. You are devious, Evelyn Moore. I am practical, she replied. But first we need real proof. Can you track the cattle? The trail is likely cold, but I can try. For the next week, Evelyn became a quiet detective. She visited families to discuss their children, but always turned the talk to ranching losses. The pattern was clear. 8 small ranchers had lost cattle, and in some cases the animals were later seen in Blackwood's herds with altered brands. Caleb tracked his cattle with the skill he learned during the war. The trail led straight to Blackwood's land into a hidden canyon. He found not just his cattle, but animals belonging to 4 other ranchers, all waiting to be rebranded. He came to Evelyn that night, his face a mask of fury and excitement. I have him. I have proof. If we can get the sheriff out there before he moves them— We are not going to the sheriff, Evelyn interrupted. We are going to the newspaper. Pine Hollow does not have a newspaper. No, but Cheyenne does, and the territorial governor is there too. She pulled out a letter she had already written, filled with dates, names, and details of the thefts. We will send this to the Cheyenne Daily Leader and a copy to the governor. We will make it a public scandal that he cannot bury. Caleb read her letter with growing admiration. How did you— Boston society runs on scandal, she said with a grim smile. The difference is this story is true. They sent the letters the next day. The waiting was tense. Caleb stayed in town to protect her while their neighbors created a network of support, watching over them. Warren Blackwood sensed something was wrong and began to increase his pressure. The threats got worse. First, just fence posts knocked over. Then a note under the schoolhouse door said, "Leave or be left." They knew it was Blackwood. Caleb's face went white with fury. He wanted her at the ranch where she would be safe, but Evelyn refused to be scared off. They finally agreed he would sleep on the schoolhouse floor to stand guard. Their letters paid off sooner than they hoped. A sharp reporter from Cheyenne, Louisa Chen, showed up asking questions that hit the mark. Her story ran on the front page, asking if Blackwood was a cattle baron or just a thief. 2 days later, a telegram from the governor forced the local sheriff to finally do his job. The sheriff arrested Blackwood's foreman, but Blackwood himself walked free, blaming his men. It did not matter. His reputation was ruined. The army canceled their contract, and his influence in Pine Hollow dried up completely. Winter blew in hard that December. Evelyn kept teaching the children who could make it to school. Caleb finished his barn just before Christmas, a quiet, proud moment for him. He then sat down and wrote to Evelyn's father. It took him 3 tries with a shaking hand, but he poured his heart out, asking for permission to marry his daughter. Evelyn read it with tears in her eyes. She said it was perfect. Her father's reply was surprisingly warm. He gave his blessing without hesitation and even included a bank draft as a wedding gift. He asked them to visit Boston when they were settled. Evelyn cried from relief and joy. Caleb held her and promised they would take a train east come springtime. She told him he was not a broken man, but a healing one. He kissed her forehead and said, "Then let's heal together." In early March, Warren Blackwood left Pine Hollow for good. His leaving felt like a final victory. They set their wedding for late April, when the prairie would be green again. One weekend, as they worked on the cabin, Caleb pulled out a small box. He told her he wanted to do it properly. He opened it to show a simple, solid gold band. Then he dropped to one knee in the grass. He asked her to build a life with him, to stand beside him, to let him love her for the rest of his days. Through her tears, her voice was steady when she said yes to it all. He slid the perfect ring onto her finger. It was not a fancy city proposal. It was real and muddy and perfect. The final week flew by as the whole town helped prepare. On the night before the wedding, they stayed apart just as tradition demanded. The night before her wedding, Evelyn stared out at the dark prairie, thinking of the man waiting for her. She had met Caleb only 8 months ago, a scandalous timeline back in Boston. But out here, it just felt right. She remembered the terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in a storm, running from a life that was not hers. This new land had not made her tough, as she had feared. It had made her true. The wedding morning dawned warm and clear. Margaret helped her into a simple white cotton dress she had altered herself. Margaret's eyes were misty as she said, "You look absolutely lovely. Caleb is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Evelyn replied, her heart fluttering. The little church was already packed with the friendly faces of their community, and at the very front, waiting for her, stood Caleb Rhodes. He was dressed in his Sunday best, including the very shirt she had helped him mend that first night they met. When he saw her at the back of the church, his face broke into the purest smile she had ever seen. Margaret squeezed her hand one last time and let her go. This was a journey she had to make on her own, just like her journey west. She walked down the aisle, holding wildflowers a student had picked for her. Caleb's hands were shaking just a bit when she reached him, but his voice was solid and sure as they spoke their vows. The ancient promises filled the small church with their power. The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and when Caleb kissed her, the room erupted in cheers. They walked back down the aisle together into the bright sunshine of their future. The party was a happy blur of food, music, and dancing that lasted until the sun began to set. As people started to leave, Henry Johnson pulled Caleb aside for a quiet word. When Caleb returned to her side, his eyes were shining with excitement. "Henry wants to recommend me for a new position with the school board," he said, "an agricultural instructor. I can still run the ranch, but it will be a steady income." "Caleb, that is wonderful news," Evelyn exclaimed. "We will be brilliant at it," he corrected her gently. "This was your vision, remember?" As the last guest left, they stood in the church doorway, watching the sky turn to gold. "Any regrets?" Caleb asked softly. Evelyn thought of her old life, a lifetime away. She looked at her husband and smiled. "Only that I did not take that needle from your hand sooner," she said. They climbed into Caleb's wagon, decorated with ribbons by the local children, and headed for the ranch. They knew hardships would come, as they always do. But the teacher and the rancher, a woman who had run from shame and a man who had run from ghosts, would face it all together. Evelyn leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. His hands on the reins were guided by love now, not by memories of war. "Welcome home, Mrs. Rhodes," Caleb murmured into her hair. And it was home. Finally and completely, it was home. The stars watched from above as two lives, once broken, were woven together into one story. A story of healing and hope, and of discovering that sometimes the things we run from lead us exactly where we were always meant to be.